Some Week 1 fantasy football takeaways. Bills versus Rams. Final score, Bills 31, Rams 10. At quarterback, Matthew Stafford struggled in this one. It's easy to blame it on a lot of things. The elbow issue that he's been having, the Rams starters not appearing in preseason and going against one of the best defenses in the league right out of the gate, or the team's poor offensive line play with their primary leader on the line, Andrew Whitworth, retired now. Even with all those factors, the bottom line is that this was not Stafford's best game, as the pressure seemed to get to him, and he seemed to only go through one read, focusing on Cooper Kupp. For now, Stafford should probably be valued as more of a high-end QB2 than a guy that was seeping into the low-end QB1 conversation, until we see what happens next week and if the Rams can resolve some of these issues. The Rams running back situation was one of the most interesting parts of the Bills versus Rams game, as the highly drafted Cam Akers saw just 3 carries for 0 yards, and late round pick in fantasy leagues, Darrell Henderson had 13 carries and 5 receptions for 73 scrimmage yards. Going into the season, Cam Akers was clearly a guy that was overvalued because Sean McVay kept hinting towards a committee, saying in August, "I look at it as we've got 2 starting backs," and the fact that Akers was coming off an injury that no running back had ever returned to pre-injury form from. I don't think anybody was expecting Akers to get this low of usage, but at the same time, it was clear that he was a little overvalued going into the year. Going forward, Darrell Henderson is probably the main guy to own right now. I would value him as a high-end flex. Cam Akers, you don't want to drop him yet, but he's kind of a sit for now until we see what's going on here. For the Rams wide receivers and tight ends, I really liked what I saw from Cooper Kupp. Once again, he looks like he's got a chance to challenge for being the number 1 overall fantasy wide receiver in 2022, as he had 13 receptions on 15 targets for 128 receiving yards and a touchdown. He was clearly Stafford's top option in this game. Looking at the other highly drafted Rams receiver, Allen Robinson, he didn't have quite as good a game. He had 1 reception on 2 targets for 12 receiving yards and 0 receiving touchdowns. Stafford wasn't looking his way. Maybe it was that he didn't have time or like he didn't have enough chemistry yet, but this is a little concerning for Robinson. I think he'll have a bounce back week this week against the Falcons since he did seem to get open, but at the same time, this wasn't an encouraging showing for week 1. Other Rams pass catchers, we got Tyler Higbee had 5 receptions on 11 targets for 39 receiving yards. He dropped quite a few passes, didn't do a great job. Given how many opportunities he got, I'd view him as just a streamer still this year. Looking at the Bills side of this game, they were absolutely dominant. They lived up to their billing as being like the Super Bowl favorite for this year. Josh Allen was phenomenal, completing 26 passes on 31 passing attempts for 297 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns. And if you may see that he had 2 interceptions, but really only one of them was his fault, where the defender made a good read. The other one was off his receiver's hands and then picked off the deflection. But yeah, Josh Allen had a great game, also had 10 carries for 56 rushing yards on the ground and a rushing touchdown. He looks like the QB1 again, and should be a very safe fantasy play this year. The Bills running backs, they didn't really run the ball a ton with them. They had 15 total carries by their running backs, with 8 going to Singletary, 6 going to Moss, and 1 going to James Cook. Singletary led the team in rushing with 8 carries for 48 rushing yards. And Singletary was actually the only one of the Bills' backs to not fumble. Moss fumbled, and James Cook fumbled on his first carry of the game. This could end up leading to Singletary getting a larger snap share next week, as it's possible that Cook and maybe even Moss are a little bit more in the doghouse after fumbling this past week. Either way, I don't really see there being anything more than a flex play here this year in this backfield, because the Bills are just going to be pass heavy and kind of run through that, because that's what they're good at. Looking at the Bills wide receivers and tight ends, Stefon Diggs showed why he's a WR1 with 8 receptions on 9 targets for 122 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. he's a locked and loaded WR1 for this year as long as Josh Allen's throwing him the ball, and he's just a phenomenal route runner. Like, what more can I say? Gabriel Davis, or Gabe Davis, had 4 receptions on 5 targets for 88 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. His receiving touchdown was a well-designed play by Ken Dorsey, where he was wide open. He looked good. I mean, 5 targets is okay, but ideally we do want to see that increase a little bit. But he's highly efficient, as we saw last year too, so he should be in the WR2 conversation all year. Jamison Crowder, Isaiah McKenzie got some work, not a ton. Dawson Knox was a little disappointing. Just 1 reception on 2 targets for 5 receiving yards and 0 receiving touchdowns. He's going to be a boom-bust tight end, depending on the day. The Bills' offense will always have a lot of scoring opportunities, and they're going to be highly efficient, but there's just going to be games like this past one where he's just not going to get featured a lot.